Have you ever like told a story and it just kind of fell flat?
Yeah.
Like you were going for that like standing ovation, but people were just kind of politely coughing instead.
Right.
Or, maybe you've seen someone like Steve Jobs totally nail like a product announcement
Oh, yeah.
with like barely a dozen words. Remember the iPhone, an iPod, a phone, and an internet communicator? Like
Yeah.
12 words that changed everything. What's the secret to like making our words stick like that?
Well, what's so fascinating is that we all tell stories every single day,
Yeah.
but making them truly captivating, I think, is a skill that often kind of eludes us.
Right.
It's not enough to just kind of recount events.
Right.
It's really about how our brains engage with those narratives and how we structure them and things like that.
Exactly. And that's exactly what we're diving deep into today. We've
Yeah.
gone through a bunch of fascinating research and practical advice,
Awesome.
all about cracking the code of just really compelling storytelling. Think of this as your shortcut to being that person in the room who can like hold everyone spellbound.
Right.
Whether you're presenting in a meeting or just sharing like a funny story about your weekend.
I love it.
Our mission with this deep dive is really simple. It's to give you actionable insights and a framework
Ah,
so you can immediately start telling stories that actually resonate.
I'm excited.
And this is not just about, crafting these like epic sagas.
Right.
These techniques apply to all kinds of communication,
Yeah.
from, a concise project update at work
Yeah.
to making, that anecdote at a party way more engaging.
Totally.
It really boils down to understanding what makes a story tick, what makes it connect with our brains.
Absolutely.
So let's unpack why so many stories just completely fall flat.
Okay.
Because I think we've all been there, right?
We have.
Like on the receiving end of those meandering, pointless stories
Oh, yeah.
where you're just kind of like, okay, when is this going to end?
Yeah.
Our sources point to like a fundamental misunderstanding. That storytelling is just about like relaying what happened.
And that's the mistake a lot of people make, right?
Yeah.
It's easy to just list events chronologically,
Right.
but the real power is in the how
Yeah.
you structure the story, the tension you build, and really the connection that you forge with your audience.
I love that. And one of the biggest mistakes that's highlighted is this no stakes problem.
Oh, no, Sid.
Our source material was citing some research from MIT,
Okay.
and it indicates that our brains literally tune out stories that just lack tension.
Makes sense.
So can you give us like a really relatable example of what that looks like?
Sure. I mean, imagine someone telling you, so I went to the grocery store and then I came home.
Okay.
And your immediate reaction is probably like, okay, and.
Right.
So there's nothing in that statement to grab your attention.
Yeah.
There's no anticipation, no potential conflict.
It's just very flat.
Very flat. And the MIT researchers found that without that element of tension,
Yeah.
the story just doesn't engage our brains the same way.
Right? It just goes in one ear and out the other.
Totally.
So it's like watching a sporting event, but neither team can win or lose.
Right.
Like, why would you care at all about the outcome?
Exactly.
So what's the fix for this no stakes problem?
The fix is to always consider what was at stake in your story.
Okay.
Even in that trip to the grocery store.
Right.
Maybe there was a risk of, missing the last ingredient for like a crucial recipe
Oh, yeah.
or being late for something important afterward.
Right.
Highlighting that potential for loss or a challenge
Yeah.
immediately raises the stakes,
Even if it's small.
even if it's tiny.
So instead of saying, I went to the store,
Yeah,
you'd say, I raced to the store hoping they still had that one ingredient I needed.
exactly.
Because if I didn't get it, the whole dinner party would be a disaster.
There you go.
Now there's a little drama.
Now we're talking.
Okay, so no stakes is a big one.
Yeah.
Another major pitfall our source points to is no structure.
Oh, no structure.
Yeah.
Classic.
And they even mention Hollyland's hero's journey,
Ah, interesting.
which sounds very cinematic.
It does.
But how does that apply to like everyday storytelling?
Even though the hero's journey is often associated with those big blockbuster films,
Right.
the principles behind it, a character with a goal facing obstacles and undergoing a transformation,
Yeah.
those are actually present in so many effective stories.
Right.
Whether they're grand adventures or simple anecdotes,
Okay.
no structure is when the story feels disorganized.
Yeah.
It's jumping around without a clear path.
It's like that person who's telling you a story and they're like, wait, did I mention the cat?
Exactly.
Oh, and then 3 years ago, something similar happened.
Right. It's all over the place.
It's like trying to assemble furniture with no instruction.
Got it.
Uh,
Without a basic framework, even potentially interesting events can get lost in a confusing mess.
right.
The hero's journey offers one comprehensive structure.
Okay.
But even a simple beginning, middle, and end
Right.
can make a huge difference in how well your story is received.
So structure is key.
It's fundamental.
All right. So we've got stakes, we've got structure.
Yes.
What's the third crucial mistake?
Let me think.
Our source highlights something about know you.
No, you.
Okay. So that sounds like it's about the audience.
It is. It's about making that connection with the audience.
Right.
A Stanford study actually found that using you language
Yeah.
can increase audience engagement by like 300%.
Wow, 300%.
Isn't that wild?
That's huge.
It is.
So the idea is that a story shouldn't feel like a diary entry.
Right.
It needs to resonate with the people who are listening.
It needs to be about them,
Right.
even if you're the one sharing the experience.
Okay, so like instead of saying, I was so frustrated when my flight was delayed,
Right.
you'd frame it more like, have you ever been stuck in an airport because of a delayed flight
Yes.
and felt that frustration building?
You're speaking their language.
And they're like, oh my gosh, yes.
Yes, exactly. It shifts the focus from your individual experience
Yeah.
to a shared human experience.
I like that.
It makes the listener way more invested in what you're saying.
So it makes them feel like they're a part of the story,
A part of the narrative.
even if they weren't physically there.
That's the power of you language.
Okay, so we've identified those three big mistakes.
Right.
No stakes, no structure, no you.
Makes sense.
And our source dives into a really cool solution, which they call the 3-act storytelling formula.
Okay. I like it.
This sounds like something we can actually use.
I hope so.
Let's hear it. So this 3-act storytelling formula, it's a foundational structure
Okay.
that you'll find in all kinds of great stories.
Like what?
From TED Talks
Yeah.
to blockbuster movies,
Interesting.
even to the most engaging everyday stories.
So it's everywhere.
It's everywhere.
Got it.
It gives you that essential roadmap.
Okay.
So Act 1 is hook plus hurt.
Hook plus hurt. That sounds intense.
It does sound pretty dramatic. So how does that translate into practical storytelling?
All right. So Act 1, hook plus hurt, is designed to immediately capture the audience's attention
Okay.
and establish that initial situation.
Right.
So the hook is that compelling opening line
Yeah.
that pulls the listener in.
Okay.
Remember our earlier example? I was dangling off a cliff.
Yeah.
Way more tension grabbing than, let me tell you about my vacation.
Right. It's like, whoa, what happened?
Exactly.
Tell me more.
The hurt is where you introduce the problem or the conflict that
Right.
kind of sets the story in motion.
Right.
It creates that need for resolution.
Okay. So start with something that grabs you
The hook.
and then immediately introduce the problem.
The hurt.
What about Act 2?
Okay. Act 2.
That's labeled fight plus fail,
Fight plus fail.
which sounds a little bit pessimistic.
It does sound a bit negative at first glance.
Yeah.
But Act 2 is really where the audience connects the most with the story. So fight refers to the protagonist's efforts to overcome that initial problem.
Okay.
But the key here is fail.
Fail.
Audiences connect with characters in situations that struggle,
Right.
not just ones that experience like effortless success.
Okay.
Showing those setbacks and challenges makes the story feel more authentic.
Yeah.
And it makes that eventual success feel more earned.
So it's like they've gone through something to get there.
Exactly.
And we as the listener or the viewer, we appreciate that journey.
Exactly.
Our source gave an example. The investor said no, then the prototype exploded. Like those escalating difficulties. It's not just about reaching the destination.
Right.
It's about the journey and the obstacles along the way.
The obstacles make the story.
Right. So we want to see that struggle.
We do.
Okay, that brings us to Act 3,
Act 3.
which is win plus wisdom.
Okay. Win plus wisdom. So it's not just about achieving the goal,
Right.
but also the lessons learned along the way.
Exactly. So win is the resolution.
Yeah.
Like the happy ending or whatever it might be.
Exactly.
But the wisdom is that takeaway for the audience.
So what?
Right. What was learned? What's the insight?
It provides closure,
Mm-hmm.
and ideally it leaves the listener with something valuable,
Okay.
something to consider or apply to their own life.
So it's not just a story.
Right.
It's a story that means something.
Exactly.
Our source even suggests rewriting a recent work update
Interesting.
using this 3-act formula
Okay.
just as an exercise
I like it.
to see how structure alone can transform a story.
Yeah.
So think about a recent update that you gave that maybe didn't have a lot of impact.
Okay.
How could you frame that initial situation as the hook plus hurt?
Right.
What were the fight plus fail moments in that process?
The struggle,
Yeah, and what's the win plus wisdom?
the outcome, and the learning.
Even like the most dry topic can become more engaging when you view it through this lens.
It's all about perspective.
Totally. Okay, so now let's get into some of these brain hacks our source talks about.
Brain hacks. I'm intrigued.
These neuroscience-backed techniques to
Hmm.
make our stories even more captivating and memorable.
I love it.
So these are like subtle but incredibly powerful things that can really enhance how our stories are received.
Oh.
The first one is the but plus therefore rule.
Okay, but and therefore.
This sounds really simple,
Yeah.
but our source suggests it can have a big impact.
Let's hear it.
So it's all about creating a stronger sense of causality
Okay.
and tension.
Got it.
So instead of using the word and then,
Yeah.
which just indicates like a sequence of events,
Okay.
you use but, which introduces contrast or a problem,
Okay.
and then therefore to establish that cause and effect relationship.
Okay. I see.
They gave a really great example.
Yeah.
I quit my job, but my bank account was empty, therefore I lived on ramen.
Okay.
That creates a mini story
Right.
with conflict and consequence,
Yeah.
which is so much more engaging than I quit my job and then my bank account was empty.
Right.
And then I lived on ramen.
It's a night and day.
And then it's very passive.
Yes.
It's just chronological.
Yeah.
But signals like a change,
a shift.
a potential obstacle,
Yeah.
and then therefore connects the events in a way that makes it mean something.
It adds that logical flow and drama.
Okay, what's the next brain hack?
Let's see.
It involves a 4-second pause.
A 4-second pause.
Interesting. That seems like it would interrupt the flow.
It does.
But research shows that strategically pausing for like 4 seconds before a key moment can actually boost audience retention by 20%.
Really?
So it's about using silence, not just filling the space with words.
Okay.
It's like a beat in music.
I like that analogy.
That creates anticipation.
Yeah.
The final brain hack is the U twist.
The U twist.
We talked about U language before,
Right.
but this seems like a more specific technique.
Fill me in.
Instead of saying, I remember that feeling when you
Yeah.
flip it and you say, you know that feeling when it directly involves the listener.
It does.
It creates that shared experience.
Yeah.
It makes them feel like, yes, that's exactly how I feel.
It's powerful.
And it makes the story feel personal,
Yeah.
even if it's not about them.
Makes that connection.
Okay, so we've explored the theory behind captivating storytelling.
We have.
But like any skill, it requires practice.
It does.
And our source offers some really cool methods that we can use to hone our abilities, even if we don't think we're natural storytellers.
Perfect. I need that.
The first one is called the bar test.
The bar test.
Okay.
Which sounds a little intimidating.
A little bit.
Because you're telling a story to a complete stranger.
In a bar.
Yeah. But the idea is to get immediate feedback on your storytelling.
Got it.
So you share a story with someone you don't know.
Yeah.
In a casual setting, like a bar or a coffee shop.
Right.
And you can see how engaged they are.
Okay.
Are they leaning in, asking questions?
Right.
Or are they looking at their phone? Checking out.
Exactly.
That makes sense.
It gives you that data about what's working and what's not.
You get real-time feedback.
Yeah, and it's low pressure.
Right.
You're just chatting with someone.
Exactly.
The next one is the TikTok drill.
The TikTok drill.
Okay. And this is designed for our short attention span world.
Makes sense these days.
So the challenge is to condense a story down to its essential elements.
Okay.
And tell it in 60 seconds.
Oh, that's tight.
You record yourself telling the story.
Yeah.
And then you edit out anything that doesn't build tension.
Ruthlessly.
Yeah.
I like it.
So it forces you to be concise.
Yeah.
And get to the point.
That's a good skill to practice.
It is.
Especially these days.
Okay, the final practice method is called the swipe file.
The swipe file. I like the sound of that.
This is about actively collecting and analyzing stories that you find compelling.
Oh, interesting.
So whether it's from a news article, a conversation, you overhear a movie, a book, anything, the key is to make it a daily habit.
Okay.
So maybe try to identify like 3 great stories each day
Okay.
and then try to reverse engineer them.
Oh, I see.
Like what was the hook? How did they build tension?
Structure.
Yeah.
Got it.
And by doing that, you start to internalize those techniques.
So you're learning by observing.
You're becoming a student of storytelling.
I like that.
This has been a really insightful deep dive.
Yeah.
We explored why stories fail to connect.
Yeah.
This powerful 3-act formula,
Right.
neuroscience-backed brain hacks,
I love those.
and practical ways to practice.
We got the tools.
We do. And now the crucial step is application.
Right.
So take one of the ideas we talked about today,
Okay.
maybe the 3-act structure or the but therefore rule,
Yeah.
and just try to craft a single sentence that tells a mini story using that technique.
I love that little challenge.
It's just a low-stakes way to experiment
Right.
and to really experience how these tools work.
Put it into practice.
And if you like this deep dive into storytelling, we've got more cool stuff coming up.
Like what?
In our next session, we're going to look at persuasion.
Persuasion.
Ooh. Specifically, some of the linguistic techniques used in political discourse.
Okay.
We're going to be exploring how language can subtly shape opinions
Fascinating.
and influence decision-making.
Can't wait.
So as you go about your day-to-day, pay attention to the stories you encounter and the stories you tell.
Yeah.
Are you building in stakes?
Good question.
Do they have structure?
Right.
Are you making them relevant to your audience?
Yeah.
And maybe, just maybe, you'll start to notice people leaning in a little closer.
That's the goal.
And listening a little more intently.
Absolutely.
So think about, what stories are you telling in your own life?
All right.
And how are those stories shaping your perceptions and experiences?
That's a great question to ponder.
It is.
I like that.
And that's something to